that, preaching, I will now ask Judith, would you please come and share a little bit about your amazing work of art that you've shared with us this evening.
Thank you, Sean, for helping make Olana the more exciting place it is these days. We know so much about church, but we're going to be learning a great deal more with Betsy's work and Eleanor's work that's happened and others over the last few decades. And even I learned more about the painting in the process when Olana hired an astronomer who will speak at a later date discussing from whence he saw the meteor. But most of all, to be here at the Explorers Club, I'm really thrilled to welcome you. I've been a member for 20 years, and I guess I have to welcome you on behalf of Will Roseman, too, who couldn't be here. But our speaker tonight, Eleanor, is also an explorer. She's a trained observer. She's done great work on Humboldt, on plein air painting. She's been to Alaska and many other places, and also came to see our old parodies here. And she really is interested and cares deeply about these things we're discussing. And over the course of tonight, better she than I talk to you more about this painting and church. He will be documenting specific things the church did on different expeditions where he really did act as an explorer and scientist, documenting the specimens of plants and other things. And Olana has tremendous archives. So we really have specific information that prove these things and how some things have been used over the years, like the Jamaicans used his samples of plants and his documentation. So with great pleasure, I introduce my long-term friend, Eleanor Harvey, and I welcome a lot of friends here who are interested in the art. And new people, because seeing Olana is spectacular. The view from Olana is mesmerizing, and the house itself is most intriguing.
Thank you. Thank you, Judith. 1 minute. I'll be quick. But for those who may not know Eleanor Jones Harvey, first of all, an amazing scholar and curator and friend of Olana and one of the stewards of church's legacy, I would say, is the Senior Curator of at the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. Her incredible exhibition, really remarkable exhibition, opened the week of COVID. Alexander von Humboldt and the United States, Art, Nature, and Culture. You would not believe what she pulled together from around the world for this exhibition. And you have to watch her walkthrough on our website, olana.org, virtual Olana. She gives the most amazing, I don't think there was a break in that filming, was it? I mean, it didn't look like it. And you have to tour remotely, virtually, that exhibition with her. And it was such a bad break. And so we're so happy to be bringing the Heart of the Andes film to Olana so people can experience it there. But many, many other major exhibitions under her belt, the Civil War in American Art. She's been at the Smithsonian American Art Museum for 20 years now. Yes, I know. 10 years before that as the Senior Curator at the Dallas Museum of Art with another great church, great painting, the Icebergs, a.k.a. the North. Did amazing exhibition and book on that as well. So let me get her up and speak because she's much more articulate than I am. Eleanor, thank you so much for coming tonight and doing this with us.
Thanks to all of you. It is a great pleasure to be here. Judith, I want to thank you again for my earlier tour, letting me geek out on all of the Shackleton memorabilia here because I have a thing for polar and exploration, whether it's Arctic or Antarctic, and so that actually made me incredibly happy. This painting also makes me incredibly happy, but frankly, almost everything Church did had an element that gives me a sense of rejuvenation and renewal. I feel like I'm traveling with him when I look at his works. And so the journey I want to take you on tonight really has to do with how Frederic Church merged his artistic talents and his lifelong interest in natural science. He did so by actually creating works of art that were made all over the globe, artworks that blend scientific accuracy with artistic inspiration. One of the shaping forces in Church's approach to studying nature is the Prussian naturalist and philosopher Alexander von Humboldt. Church read the second volume of Humboldt's Cosmos. That is Church's copy you see up there, the 1/3 of which is his advice to landscape painters. In this volume, Humboldt described landscape painting as a kind of visual poetry, requiring a heightened sense of awareness and aptitude on the part of the artist. And then Humboldt expanded on this. The artist should see the world as a scientist, well-read in natural philosophy and observant of nature and its processes, so that he could invest his works with scientific truth as well as aesthetic merit. Church came of age as Humboldt's reputation had already made him an oft-quoted authority on numerous topics, and Humboldt's words helped shape Church's approach to sketching and painting from nature to such an extent that he is referred to as the American Humboldt. Church would maintain the balance between science and artistic curiosity his entire life, enamored of dramatic lighting no matter where he went, from Labrador to Jamaica to Greece. He studied rainbows as both scientific and aesthetic phenomena and tackled the evanescent auroras. Tonight, I want to focus on the way Church deployed his interest in astronomy and meteorological phenomena, in particular between the years 1860 and 1866, a time of profound personal and national change. We're going to start with the way Church commemorated moments in his personal life, beginning with the Star of the East. Painted in 1860, it was timed to coincide with his marriage to Isabel Carnes, imbuing the scene with biblical overtones and spiritual significance, accentuated by the inclusion of palm trees, which can be found nowhere near Hudson, New York. He followed up with, on the theme of the painting that you see in the upper left, Sunrise, painted in 1862, the year that their first child, Herbert Edwin, was born. A daughter, Emma Frances, followed in 1864, invoking Church to paint Moonrise, the rising moon. However, tragedy struck quickly. Both children died from diphtheria within 12 days of each other in March of 1865, imbuing this work with an unwelcome and unanticipated elegiac quality. These personal milestones, both celebratory and mournful, are indicative of Church's embrace of traditional metaphorical symbolism, using aerial phenomena as avatars for the artist's frame of mind. The same year Church and Isabel married, the nation was tipping into civil war. The summer and early fall of 1860 was an unusually active time for atmospheric phenomena. Comets, meteors, even the Aurora Borealis was visible up and down the Atlantic seaboard. Newspaper articles, letters to the editor, spoke to the broad ripples of unease and fear associated with these events. On July 20th, a meteor streaked across the eastern sky. And this was no ordinary meteor. Unlike the Leonids, which is what you normally get, for instance, what you see falling over Niagara in November of 1883, shooting stars are often a quick streak of light that looks like it's falling from the skies, and it's over in an instant. Meteor showers amplify that experience rather than the singular meteor that we are dealing with here. And I'm going to ask our wonderful AV people to run this YouTube clip here, because this was an Earth-grazing meteor. It took 30 seconds to sail overhead. Can you play that for me? Take a look at the painting. Take a look at the clip that you're seeing. "30 seconds is a really long time to watch something streak across the sky." And that clip of that Russian meteor that I showed you, everyone in 2013 thought that was a rocket. There was a sonic boom. It flew low into the atmosphere in broad daylight. In 1860, the renowned astronomy professor W.H.C. Bartlett at West Point observed this phenomenon, and it said it resembled, quote, a fire balloon propelled by the burning of a feeble rocket composition. Remarkably low altitude prompted him to think that it was some new and marvelously successful pyrotechnic device fired from the western hills. The metaphors consistently spoke of artillery, as though the very sky were already at war. The cover page of Harper's Weekly on Saturday, August 4th, ran 3 wood-engraved images of this particular meteor as its lead story, including one written by art collector Samuel Avery. The meteor the church witnessed, the strange display, captured the beginning of the meteor's breakup in this small, unearthly painting. Though we were a nation enamored of the burgeoning sciences, Americans still looked to religion to help explain the unexplainable. The Bible served up parables of divine retribution in the skies. In the North, abolitionists feared that God was angry that they had not done enough to abolish slavery. And in the South, the sky became a specter of the fear of Northern retribution. And among millions of African Americans, both enslaved and free, word of the meteor provided an emblem of possible liberation and justice. During the 1850s, meteors had already come to be associated with the abolitionist John Brown, the man whose actions many consider to have triggered the Civil War. Contemporary poets likened the abolitionist to a meteor, his fiery trajectory across the political landscape compared to that of celestial bodies. His raid on Harper's Ferry in October 1859 and his subsequent execution became a flare in the night and an omen of the strife yet to come. Writer Herman Melville penned a poem linking the meteor of 1859 with Brown, portraying him as an equally disturbing force of nature. Melville closed his poem, The Portent, with lines comparing Brown's beard to the tail of the meteor. But the streaming beard is shown, weird John Brown, the meteor of the war. Melville's cryptic phrases recognized that the strange celestial sightings, like Brown's raid, had upended nocturnal stargazing and suffused even that pastime with unease. Walt Whitman also witnessed the same earth-raising meteor that inspired Church's paintings. His poem of 1860 is titled Year of Meteors, 1859 to 60, and in it he reflects on Lincoln's election to Brown's hanging, proclaiming, "Year of meteors, brooding year, I would bind in words retrospective some of your deeds and signs. I would sing how an old man, tall with white hair, mounted the scaffold in Virginia." Whitman reiterated the connection between the effect of Brown's actions and the appearance of this particular meteor, comparing Brown to the comet that came unannounced out of the north, flaring in heaven, that strange, huge meteor procession, dazzling and clear, shooting over our heads. A moment long, it sailed its balls of unearthly light o'er our heads, then departed, dropped in the night, and was gone. For Whitman, John Brown was the meteor in the night sky, the portent of unavoidable sectional strife centered on the issue of slavery. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that it has taken both scientists and art historians to understand this painting. It was Donald Olson, a physics professor at Texas State University, who wanted to know exactly which meteor Whitman was talking about. And so we went back to the historical record and by process of elimination figured out it had to be the meteor on July 20th, 1860, then ran across Church's painting, then put 2 and 2 together. And it is on his research that I was able to base the argument that I placed in my own scholarship, which is something that is, I think, a core part of the scientific method. Henry David Thoreau wrote a eulogy that was delivered at Brown's grave on July 4th, declaring, "The last 6 weeks of his life was meteor-like, flashing through the darkness in which we live. I know of nothing so miraculous in our own history." The darkness in Church's hands becomes a soft purple shot with gold. The inspiration in its palette of color and its mood was derived from his mentor Thomas Cole's fifth and final painting, Desolation, from the monumental series on view at the New York Historical Society, The Course of Empire, which you can see over there, in which the moon casts a wan reflection on the waters as man's empire has crumbled into ruins and nature seems poised to reclaim what man has destroyed. A similar sobriety infuses Church's small painting of a meteor, parallels that would have resonated with their friends, their colleagues, and their patrons. War was declared on April 12, 1861, and by May 19th, Church was at work on his first and only intentional Civil War painting, Our Banner in the Sky. After the lowering of the American flag over Fort Sumter, the North was consumed with flag imagery, and Church's painting was declared our first war picture by the New York Tribune. But the reason I include it here has less to do with that and more to do with its backstory. On June 10th, Church's friend, the rising literary star Theodore Winthrop, became the first Union officer to die in battle at Big Bethel in Virginia. Winthrop had written the broadside for Church's Heart of the Andes and spent the weeks leading up to the declaration of war in Church's studio, where he and George Curtis, the editor of the influential Harper's Weekly, talked of nothing else, as Curtis recalled. Winthrop couldn't wait to enlist when war broke out. Stationed in Washington, Winthrop was tired of the inaction and got himself reassigned to Benjamin Butler's forces at Fortress Monroe. Charged with flushing out Confederates hiding nearby, Winthrop dismounted his horse and did something profoundly stupid. He stood on top of a fallen log, sword drawn to rally his men, and a North Carolina sharpshooter brought him down with a single shot to the chest. Back in New York, Church read with increasing dread the reports that at first his gallant young friend was among the missing, and after 3 agonizing days, confirmed among the dead. Winthrop's death stunned the cultural world of New York. Frederic Church reeled from the loss, unable any longer to keep the deadly reality of the war at intellectual arm's length. With Winthrop's death, Our Banner in the Sky accrued a more mournful layer of meaning, soberly encompassing loss as well as triumph. For this small work, Church clearly borrowed the palette and composition from an earlier painting, Twilight in the Wilderness, completed in 1859. Quoting from the intense reds and oranges in the sky, Church took an evocative sunset and adapted it to become nature's memorial, the very landscape mourning the dissolution of the Union, the state of the nation, like the edges of the flag in tatters. But Church had a more personal reason to borrow from this specific painting, because it commemorated the last trip Church and Winthrop had taken together to Maine in the summer of 1856. It was a trip during which they stopped in Portland to hear presidential candidate John C. Fremont speak. Fremont was an anti-slavery candidate and Winthrop's choice, who would lose to James Buchanan in the general election in the fall. Winthrop's hope for the nation rode on that speech, his enthusiasm for enlisting a consequence of Fremont's loss. Church invested this small oil sketch with all of the emotion he could bring to bear, turning a patriotic gesture into a personal ensign to commemorate the loss of his friend. Our Banner in the Sky, with its lurid high-keyed color, tattered flag, and overt patriotic symbolism, is a memento of loss, conflating the national calamity with his own personal grief. The war years proved to be a bounty for celestial portents. The preponderance of meteors, comets, and auroras made it seem as though the American skies, north and south, were witness to an apocalyptic battle overhead that rivaled the actual battles on the ground. Chief among the phenomena approaching apocalypse and days of judgment was the aurora borealis, eerie electrical pulses that gave rise to fears of nature out of control, appearing and disappearing with no warning. From the 1850s, the appearance of the auroras spurred lengthy accounts in local newspapers that contributed scientific data to astrological interpretations. In 1860, the polar explorer Isaac Israel Hayes outfitted an expedition on a vessel he had recently rechristened the SS United States. He wintered over, trapped in the Arctic ice pack. His safe return in October 1861 was cause for celebration, a rare bright spot in a winter dark with war. The SS United States had survived an Arctic winter and returned intact, which was more than could be said for its namesake, the Ship of State. At a lecture here in New York on his experiences, Hayes ruefully noted, "Since we last met in this hall, great changes have taken place. When I left the regions of eternal ice, I little dreamed that a powerful rebellion was desolating my country, and that civil war was raging among a people whom I left prosperous and happy. This great national calamity alters the relations under which we now meet. God willing, I trust, yet to carry the flag of our great republic with not a single star erased from its glorious union to the extreme northern limits of the earth." Hayes cast polar exploration as a form of patriotism and endurance as a northern value. No less a literary figure than Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote passionately about the need to fight to abolish slavery using Arctic and tropical imagery to embody the polarities of the conflict. In his poem Voluntaries, published in 1863 after the New York City draft riots, he honored those who had voluntarily fought. Freedom is described as a winged creature of the far north who reaches out to enslaved blacks whom he described as the offspring of the sun, yearning for freedom's flag on which, quote, "The snowflake is our banner's star, her stripes the boreal streamers are." Not necessarily the world's greatest piece of poetry, but effective in the moment. He's a better essayist, let's give him that. It's the passive tense, guys. So in Emerson's view, the stars and stripes of the American flag are writ large in the northern skies, snowflakes, stars, and auroras. Icebergs and the Arctic became powerful metaphors for the righteousness of the Union cause and for the inevitable end of slavery. Framed against this backdrop, Church's painting took shape on his easel during the winter of 1864. Under a dark Arctic sky, Hayes's ship lies frozen in the pack ice at the base of a looming cliff. As the ice grips the SS United States and by proxy the nation, the auroras snake across the winter sky like a grim warning from God, a bleak foreshadowing of doom. By this time, it's difficult to find a description of the auroras that do not link it in some way to the Civil War. In the North, there was a cartoon called Northern Light, printed in Harper's Weekly, showing a Confederate general cowering at the advancing Northern Lights, which appear like the oncoming Union Army, bayonets fixed and ready. John Greenleaf Whittier prefaced his poem, Aerial Omens, by noting that for those who had fought in the Revolutionary War, the auroras were, quote, "an army of fiery warriors seen in the sky, with banners floating and plumes tossing and horsemen hurrying to and fro. The strange changes of the Borealis were considered by many as ominous as approaching war, and consequently excited no little apprehension. The breaking out of war soon after completely confirmed this supposition, and many an aged revolutionist will still yet tell of the wonderful Northern Lights, and that he saw the battles of Saratoga and Bennington pictured distinctly in the sky long before their actual occurrence." The auroras lent themselves to yet another layer of foreboding, a metaphorical meaning drawn from the Bible evoking the handwriting on the wall from the story of Belshazzar's feast. A cartoon published by Currier and Ives shows Jefferson Davis, identified as the modern Belshazzar, recoiling from just such a message intended to presage his downfall. "The Union forever, the day is dawning, watch and wait, attention Union men, the hour of deliverance approaches, Unionists, assert your rights." In this idiom, the South is cast as a modern Babylon, ripe for destruction, for its continued advocacy of slavery and its disloyalty to the Union. In Church's Aurora Borealis, the eerie and silent nocturnal illumination that sways and ripples across the night sky might also be taken for the illuminated words that spelled out Belshazzar's fate. Church's aurora, like the handwriting on the wall, spelled out the nation's apocalyptic fear that the skies warned of imminent judgment. Belshazzar's feast was a popular metaphor at this time. I'll bet you didn't know that. And Church's friend, the composer Louis Gottschalk, was writing a libretto for a Belshazzar's feast as Church worked on this painting. In fact, the two of them both met at William Blodgett's house and played a duet on the piano in front of this painting. I love trivia. Fear of final retribution lay behind much public nervousness expressed over the continued appearance of the auroras during the war years, encouraging apocalyptic interpretation of the phenomenon. Hayes spoke eloquently and extensively about the brilliant auroras he witnessed on his trip, emphasizing their biblical and apocalyptic overtones, noting that the strange light, quote, glowed as if the air was filled with charnel meteors pulsating with wild inconstancy over some vast, illimitable city of the dead. Church's auroras are also suffused with this vision of the Arctic night, rendering this illimitable place with a powerful sense of melancholy and discord. Church's auroras are silent flickerings of lurid light that rippled across the sky like a nocturnal, unhinged rainbow. Artist and explorer present the Arctic as an unearthly landscape that functions as the inverse of paradise if you think of the way Church captured the rainbow refracted in the spume rising from the mist over that famous natural monument of Niagara Falls. As is the case with all great works of art in any medium, Church's paintings are multivalent in their layers of interpretive significance. Far be it from me to confine Church's auroras to any one of those layers, meteorological or metaphorical, no matter how compelling. Because at the same time that Church was putting the finishing touches on this painting, his close friend and traveling companion Cyrus Field was struggling to realize a working transatlantic cable. Church's painting presents the very same landscape, stretching from the mountainous headlands of Labrador over to Ireland behind Cyrus Field. And like Field's cable, Church's auroras span the Atlantic Ocean, providing electromagnetic impulses that connect distant lands and offer the promise of instantaneous communication across vast and inhospitable distances. No more ships trapped in the ice, delaying the international exchange of ideas. And overhead, the brilliant auroras stretch unfettered from North America across the Atlantic. It is not hard to envision in the broken segments of Church's auroras a metaphor for Field's sequence of snapped cables and broken transmissions. Not all of Church's atmospheric phenomena occur in total darkness. In this sketch, the artist used a straight edge. In this sketch, Church captured the crepuscular rays that shoot up through the low levels of clouds approaching sunset. Based on the terrain loosely indicated in the foreground, this may have been made in 1865, shortly after the auroras, when Church and his wife, grieving the loss of their first two children and reeling from the impact of the preceding 4 years, traveled to Jamaica to heal their souls and repair their marriage. Church appears to have relied on this preliminary sketch as he began to compose a painting he would title The Afterglow. In the finished oil sketch that you see in the lower right, Church has added the undulating foreground and mountains of Jamaica. He's made the sky more atmospheric and dramatic. He would then take this amplification one step further in the studio in the larger finished painting called The Afterglow, bringing the viewer closer to the distant body of water, allowing us to stand on the top of a rise close to a picturesque ruin. In an elegiac turn, Church dedicated this painting to the memory of his sister, who had recently died. Further indication of how personally Church felt about this subject, he kept both the oil sketch and the finished painting them, and eventually hanging them at his home, Olana. From his initial observation to the preliminary contours of the painting to the final composition, Church painted the synthesis of scientific truth and personal emotion. Back home in Hudson, New York, in 1866, Church observed and painted a stunning sketch capturing not just the crepuscular rays, but the waning crescent moon as well. There's a fascinating story about this work that bears repeating, demonstrating Church's lifelong interest in atmospheric accuracy as the basis of his working method. This scene, which had to have occurred near sunset, is an unusual occurrence. Unusual enough that Carl Loatman, the director of the Mid-Hudson Astronomical Association, was able to use NASA software to scroll back through the historic skies and find the most probable date and time that Church could have witnessed this phenomenon. That date turns out to be December 7th, 1866, and afforded Church the opportunity to record, okay, follow me here, the waning crescent moon, the southwestern sky, 4:20 p.m. from Olana Hill, 2 years before Church had built his house. This was just as the sun set and the moon was about to follow a bit less than 6 degrees after it. Church, you'll notice, used a straight edge, and you can see the lines right here, in order to line up his rays, defining the crepuscular rays. Furthermore, Church had sketched the start of that same lunar month in November 1866, a sketch that is anecdotally described as river through mountain valley with sky and crescent moon. And you can see the orientation. Here you have the waxing moon facing this direction. You have the waning moon over here, over the exact same landscape. So the orientation during the lunar month of November into December of 1866, Church recorded both of these astronomical phenomenon from the site of his eventual home on the top of the hill, 4 years before he started construction on the house, which you will see in this oil sketch that he made in August of 1872. In 1883, Frederic Church wrote in frustration, "I wish science would take a holiday for 10 years so that I could catch up." He expressed the impossibility of absorbing it all, of grasping it all, of synthesizing it all. And from the top of this hill at Olana, he painted nearly every day from its prospect. Every view, every season, the daily weather added another layer to his experience. Church might not ever catch up on paper or with paint, but in constructing Olana, which he called the center of the world, he created a kind of summation, a point from which he could view the surrounding world and understand in his own mind how it all connected. Church's career reflected Humboldt's assertion that nature and art are united in my work, a fitting approach to understanding an artist's lifelong interest as he looked to the skies for inspiration. Thank you.